Yo, what's going on, boys? Welcome back to another breakdown of the main event. Now, I just got done watching the main event of Aljamain Sterling versus Youssef Zalal, and obviously, Aljamain Sterling was able to come out on the top with a relatively dominant decision victory over Zalal, which was somewhat of a surprise. A lot of people thought going into this fight, the youth, athleticism, speed, and power of Youssef Zalal would just be a little bit too much for Aljo, but that could not be further from the truth. Aljo dominated this fight. So, without further ado, let's go into how he actually did it. So, I think going into this fight, it's pretty clear what Aljamain Sterling's game plan was. Essentially, going into the fight, he just needed to pressure. If he was able to pressure effectively, that's where he would be able to go to work. Land some shots on the feet once Zalal's back is alongside the cage. And from there, when Zalal's thinking about the strikes, that's when you can shoot in for your double leg takedowns, your trips, and just find takedowns in general. And on the ground, obviously, Aljamain Sterling is a better grappler as compared to Zalal. Now, Zalal's really good as well. There's no question about it. But I do think Aljamain Sterling is essentially a level ahead of Zalal. And I think we saw that on multiple different occasions tonight. So that was more or less his game plan, and he executed that incredibly effectively. Now, there were some moments where Zalal had some success, like in the beginning of round 2 and the beginning of round 5. He did have some success, but outside of those couple of moments that he had in a couple of rounds, Aljamain Sterling more or less dominated him throughout the entirety of that fight. Also, round 3, obviously, Zalal won that round. That's also a round where he had some success. But outside of those couple of moments that I mentioned, it was more so of a dominant performance from Aljamain Sterling. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is obviously it was a great performance by Aljo, but a big reason for why Aljo was able to constantly get pressure against Youssef Zalal was because Zalal didn't really have anything for Aljo. And what I mean by that is I thought multiple different occasions throughout the entirety of this fight, every time that Aljo wanted to pressure Zalal, he just put his hands up and walked forward. He didn't feint. He didn't really throw anything out there, and he was easily able to force Zalal's back alongside the cage. And from there, he was able to go to work. And I think that's a real deficiency in the game of Youssef Zalal. If you're able to get pressure that easily when your opponents more or less throw out nothing at you, just walk forward, it's going to be very difficult to beat these higher level guys. Now, I think a big reason for why we saw this and why Zalal really never thought to improve this aspect of his game is in the past, there's been multiple times where he's able to fight like this and have a lot of success. Youssef Zalal, because he's more athletic, faster, probably hits harder than most guys, he was able to have a lot of success by just backing up, utilizing footwork, landing good shots when his back is alongside the cage. But unfortunately, in this matchup versus a guy of the level of Aljamain Sterling, it just did not work. So I think that's more or less the issue with Zalal. Now, outside of just getting backed up very easily, I thought he also made a couple of other different mistakes. Like, for example, in round 2, as I mentioned before, I thought Zalal was having a really good round. He was landing his jabs effectively. It almost seemed as if Aljamain Sterling was starting to slow down a little bit in certain moments where Zalal was landing good shots. But unfortunately, after all the success he had in that round, Zalal decided to spin, and you cannot spin against a guy the level of a grappler as an Aljamain Sterling. I think we've seen this multiple different times in multiple different fights, but fighters need to stop spinning when they're going up against high-level grapplers, and this is another example of that. And after all the success that Zalal had early in round 2, once he spinned, he got taken down pretty easily, and then from there, he just more or less got held down, and Aljo was able to go to work. So great performance for sure from Aljamain Sterling, but at the same time, it's not as if Youssef Zalal didn't make any mistakes. He made quite a few mistakes, but great performance though, nonetheless. You can't really take that away. Aljo looked great in this fight, pressured effectively, found takedowns effectively, landed a lot of damage. He didn't just look to get on top or take the back. He actually looked to land damage as well, and he really tried to get that finish in multiple different occasions. So you do got to respect that performance. I thought, honestly, it was a great performance. Maybe one of the best performances of his career at this point, which is crazy to say considering he was a champion in the past, but I thought he really looked great in this fight. Pressured effectively, looked for the finish, and just had a great performance. Now, as for what's next for both these guys, let's start with Aljamain Sterling. As for Aljamain Sterling, I think a number one contender fight for him next does honestly make a lot of sense. Aljamain Sterling versus John Silva for the number one contender fight does make a lot of sense in my opinion. Obviously, Movsar Evloev is going to get the next title shot against Alexander Volkanovski. I think that's more or less set in stone, as it should be. Movsar does deserve the next title shot. But after that, I do think a fight between Jean Silva and Aljamain Sterling for the number one contender fight does honestly make a lot of sense. So that's what I would like to see for him. Now, as for Youssef Zalal, I definitely would like to see a step down in competition. We'll see where he's at in the rankings on Tuesday, and maybe going forward from there, I'll have a better answer for you on a specific guy who I think he should fight. But I guess really my thoughts on Zalal is I don't think he's terrible. I just think his decision making was not great in this fight, a fight where his decision making more or less needed to be very good. And on top of that, I thought he showed a real deficiency in terms of him just getting backed up very easily. And that's not something you can really get away with once you fight the higher level fighters at the weight class. But in terms of his game overall, I think Zalal's very talented. I think he can strike effectively. He's really fast. He hits relatively hard. His grappling is incredibly high level. I think he can out grapple and submit a lot of guys at featherweight, honestly, outside of Aljamain Sterling. I think he more or less just ran into probably the best grappler at 145. I know Movsar as well as Aljamain Sterling are both incredibly high-level grapplers, but Aljo is more dangerous for sure on the ground, and I think Zalal kind of just ran into that. But I still think Zalal is good. I know a lot of fans after this fight are going to say, oh, Zalal sucks, which is kind of always what you hear whenever a promising young fighter loses. All of a sudden, he's the worst fighter in the world. We've seen this multiple times. We're probably going to see it again with Zalal. I don't think he's terrible. I still think he's very talented. I would be interested to see who the UFC does give him next, but nonetheless, the praise definitely needs to go to Aljamain Sterling in this performance. I thought he looked great. He more or less looked flawless. There was a couple of times in the fight, as I said, beginning of round 2, beginning of round 5, where Zalal had some moments. But outside of that, pressure, takedowns, take the back, land good shots on the ground. More or less a great performance. And also on top of that, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but on top of that, he was relatively close to finding a rear naked choke, a modified rear naked choke. But nonetheless, great performance. So we shall see. Good job by Aljamain Sterling. Definitely an exciting performance nonetheless, and we'll see where we go forward from here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if you guys had Youssef Zalal in this fight. Did you have Aljamain Sterling in this fight? Did you think it was a good fight? What do you think should be next for either one of these guys? Let me know down below, fellas. But anyways, that's been the video. I appreciate you guys for watching. But until the next time, peace out, fellas.